You know what's wild? While everyone's fighting over overpriced condos in Nashville and Memphis, there are actual farmhouses sitting in the Tennessee countryside for less than the cost of a new pickup truck. I'm talking proper homes with land, not some rundown shack. And nobody's talking about it. So here's the thing about Tennessee right now. The state's having this weird moment where cities are exploding with tech workers and remote employees. Property values are shooting through the roof. But drive 30 minutes outside any major hub, and it's like you've entered a different economy entirely. I've been digging into this for months, and what I found honestly surprised me. Let me give you some context. The median home price in Nashville hit around $400,000 recently. Franklin, Brentwood, those trendy suburbs? Forget about it. You're looking at $600,000–$700,000 easy. But here's where it gets interesting. In counties like Wayne, Perry, Decatur, and Houston, you can still find farmhouses with acreage for under $100,000. Sometimes way under. Now, I know what you're thinking. There's gotta be a catch, right? And yeah, we'll get into that. But the opportunity here is real, especially if you're willing to put in some work or if you're just tired of the whole suburban nightmare and want something different. Tennessee's got this unique geography thing going on. You've got the Smoky Mountains in the east, rolling hills through the middle, and flatter farmland out west. Each region has its own vibe and price point. The eastern part, near the mountains, tends to be pricier because of tourism and the whole Gatlinburg Pigeon Forge effect. Middle Tennessee around Nashville is obviously expensive now. But West Tennessee and some of these middle counties that aren't right on the interstate. That's where things get interesting. The agricultural history here matters too. Tennessee used to be way more farming focused. Tobacco, cotton, cattle, timber. A lot of these farmhouses were built by families who worked the land for generations. But as farming became more consolidated and young people moved to cities, these properties started sitting. Some families held onto them as investment or nostalgia. Others just want them gone. What's happening now is this weird convergence. You've got older landowners looking to downsize or cash out. Their kids don't want to farm. Meanwhile, you've got this growing group of people who are done with city life, especially after everyone realized they could work remotely. But those people are mostly looking at the trendy areas. They're not thinking about Perry County or Wayne County. Here's something most people don't realize about Tennessee property taxes. They're actually pretty reasonable compared to a lot of states. The effective rate is under 1% in most counties. So even if you buy a place with 10 or 20 acres, your annual tax bill might be less than $2,000. Compare that to property taxes in New Jersey or Illinois, and it's almost laughable. Another factor is that Tennessee has no state income tax. So if you're someone thinking about relocating and maybe running a small farm operation or remote business, that starts to look pretty attractive from a financial planning standpoint. The infrastructure in rural Tennessee varies wildly. Some of these farmhouses are on paved county roads with decent access. Others are down gravel roads that turn into mud pits when it rains. Internet access is hit or miss. Some areas have gotten fiber optic through rural broadband initiatives. Others are still stuck with satellite or nothing at all. This matters a lot if you're planning to work remotely. Water systems are another consideration. Some properties are on county water, others have wells. If you're looking at a property with a well, you need to know the condition and whether it's ever run dry. Same with septic systems. A lot of these older farmhouses have septic tanks that might need work or replacement. The thing is, even with all these considerations, the math still works out crazy in your favor compared to what you'd pay for a comparable property in most parts of the country. A 5-acre property with a 3-bedroom farmhouse that needs some cosmetic work might run you $60,000 or $70,000 in the right county. Try finding that anywhere near a major metro area in another state. So that's the landscape we're dealing with. Tennessee's got this sweet spot right now, where rural property values haven't caught up to the general real estate insanity. It won't last forever, but it's here now. Let us dig into where exactly these deals are hiding and what you need to know before you jump in. All right, let's get specific about where these deals actually are. I'm going to break down the regions and counties where you can still find legitimate bargains, and I'll tell you what each area is actually like because that matters just as much as the price. Starting with Middle Tennessee, which might surprise you since Nashville's there. But once you get outside the Nashville orbit, things change fast. Perry County is one of my top picks. It's about an hour and a half southwest of Nashville. The county seat is Linden, population maybe 1,000 people. This is quiet country. Rolling hills, lots of timberland. The Tennessee River runs along the eastern border. You can find older farmhouses here on 5 to 10 acres for $70,000 to $90,000 pretty regularly. These aren't going to be move-in ready usually, but structurally sound properties that need updating. The area's economy is mostly logging, some cattle farming, and people who commute to bigger towns for work. It's quiet, like really quiet. If you want peace and space, this works. Wayne County is another sleeper. It's south of Perry County, closer to the Alabama line. Waynesboro is the main town. This county's bigger on acreage, so you'll see properties with 20, 30, even 50 acres in the affordable range. The terrain here is beautiful, honestly. More elevation changes than Perry County, some limestone bluffs, lots of creeks and springs. Prices here can get wild. I've seen 40-acre properties with old farmhouses listed under $100,000. Now, these usually need serious work. We're talking potential foundation issues, old electrical, maybe no HVAC. But if you're handy or willing to hire local contractors who charge reasonable rates, you can end up with something incredible for not much money. Decatur County is west of the Tennessee River in West Tennessee. Decaturville is tiny, but Parsons has a bit more going on. This is flatter country, more traditional farmland. The soil's better for row crops if you're thinking about actually farming. Property taxes here are low even by Tennessee standards. What I like about Decatur County is that it's not quite as isolated as some other areas. You're about 2 hours from Nashville, hour and a half from Jackson, which has actual stores and services. But land is still cheap. You can get into a farmhouse with acreage for $60,000 to $80,000 if you're patient and willing to look at properties that need work. Houston County is the smallest county in Tennessee by area. It's wedged between bigger counties in Middle Tennessee. Erin is the county seat. This area is interesting because you get the rural lifestyle, but you're not completely cut off from civilization. Clarksville is about 40 minutes away. Nashville's maybe an hour and 15. Farmhouses here tend to be a bit more expensive than the counties I mentioned earlier, but you're still looking at under $150,000 for most properties with acreage. The trade-off is better access to services, better internet in some areas, and easier commuting if you need to go to a city occasionally. Lewis County is another one to watch. Hohenwald is the main town, known for the elephant sanctuary if you've heard of that. The terrain here is really varied. Some areas are hilly and forested, others are open farmland. This county has a bit more character than some of the others. There's a small artsy community, some interesting restaurants for a rural area, and generally more happening than you'd expect. Properties here run the gamut. You can still find deals under $100,000, but the nicer farmhouses with good land go for more. The advantage is that if you do buy here and fix something up, there's actually a market for it if you ever want to sell. Some of these other counties, that's less certain. Up in the northern middle part of the state, you've got counties like Macon and Jackson. These are a bit closer to Kentucky. The landscape is really pretty, more rolling hills and tobacco barns. Prices are still reasonable, but creeping up because these areas are starting to get discovered by people leaving Nashville. One thing about all these counties is that you need to go visit in person. Drive the back roads, stop at local diners, talk to people. Every county has areas that are nicer and areas that are rough. Some roads flood every spring. Some communities are tight-knit and welcoming. Others are kind of clannish and suspicious of outsiders. The school systems in most of these rural counties are small and underfunded if you've got kids. Healthcare access is limited. You're driving to bigger towns for specialists or emergencies. These are real considerations that go beyond just the property price. But if you can work with those limitations, the value proposition is insane compared to what you'd pay elsewhere. Let's talk about what you're actually getting when you buy one of these cheap farmhouses, because I think people have unrealistic expectations on both ends. Some think they're getting a pristine farmhouse for nothing. Others think everything's going to be a teardown. Reality's somewhere in the middle. Most farmhouses in this price range were built between the 1920s and 1970s. You'll see everything from old dog trot style houses to simple ranch layouts to two-story farmhouses with big porches. Construction quality varies wildly based on when it was built and who built it. The older homes, especially pre-1950s, often have better bones than you'd expect. Real dimensional lumber, solid foundations if they were done right, plaster walls instead of drywall, but they also have outdated everything. Knob and tube wiring that needs complete replacement. Old cast iron or galvanized plumbing. Single pane windows. No insulation in the walls. Heating systems that are either ancient or non-existent. Houses from the 60s and 70s tend to have more modern systems but cheaper construction. You'll see more foundation settling issues, roof problems, and just generally lower quality materials. These often need just as much work as the older homes, but with less character to show for it. The common issues you'll encounter are pretty predictable. Roofs are big. A lot of these farmhouses have metal roofs that are rusted through or asphalt shingles that are way past their lifespan. Replacing a roof on a farmhouse isn't cheap. You're looking at $10,000 to $20,000, depending on size and pitch. Foundation problems are another one. Settlement cracks are normal in old houses, but sometimes you'll see serious issues. Pier and beam foundations that are sagging or rotted. Concrete block foundations with major cracks. Sometimes these are fixable for reasonable money. Sometimes they're deal breakers. Electrical systems in older farmhouses are often scary. Fuse boxes, exposed wiring, insufficient capacity for modern loads. You'll need to budget for a complete rewire on most properties. That's another 10 to 15 grand typically. Plumbing can be a nightmare. Old galvanized pipes that are corroded and restricted. Septic systems that are failing or undersized. Wells that need new pumps or don't produce enough water. Water quality can be an issue too, with high iron or sulfur content. HVAC is usually non-existent or ancient. A lot of these old farmhouses just had wood stoves or fireplaces for heat and nothing for cooling. Installing modern heating and air isn't necessarily expensive in terms of labor in rural areas, but the equipment costs what it costs. Then you've got the cosmetic stuff. Outdated kitchens and bathrooms. Old flooring. Walls that need repair. Ceilings with water stains. This is the stuff that looks overwhelming, but is actually the least important if the house is structurally sound. Here's the realistic budget situation. If you buy a farmhouse for $70,000 that needs work, you should plan on spending another $30,000 to $60,000 to make it properly livable, depending on how much you can DIY and how extensive the issues are. So, you're all in for maybe $100,000 to $130,000. Compare that to buying even a modest updated home in a suburban area of any decent-sized city where you're spending $300,000 plus. The math still works heavily in your favor. The land itself is usually the best part of the deal. 10 or 20 acres in Tennessee can be incredibly useful. You can garden, raise chickens, keep a couple cows or goats, hunt, have trails for ATVs or horses. The timber might have value if you've got mature hardwoods. Some properties have creek frontage or ponds. Property boundaries and surveys matter. A lot of these old farms have been subdivided over the years, and the property lines aren't always clear. You want a recent survey before you close. Also check for easements and right-of-ways. Sometimes there are old agreements that let neighbors cross your property or use a well. Zoning in rural counties is usually pretty relaxed. Most areas are agricultural zoning, which allows a lot of flexibility. You can typically have farm animals, operate a small farm business, put up outbuildings without too much hassle. But check the specific county regulations because they vary. One thing people don't think about is ongoing costs. Even if your mortgage or purchase price is low, you've got property insurance, taxes, utilities, maintenance, and upkeep. These old houses need constant attention. Something's always breaking or wearing out. Budget for that realistically. The other consideration is resale value. In most of these rural counties, the real estate market is slow. If you need to sell quickly, it might take a year or more to find a buyer. These aren't liquid investments. You're buying for lifestyle and long-term value, not quick appreciation. But if you go in with clear eyes about what you're getting and what it'll take to make it work, these properties offer something you really can't find anymore in most of America. Space, quiet, affordability, and freedom to live how you want. So, you're interested. You've looked at some listings online. Maybe you're planning a trip to Tennessee. Let's just talk about the practical steps and what it's actually like to make this lifestyle work, because that's where a lot of people stumble. First, financing. This can be tricky. A lot of these cheaper farmhouses won't qualify for conventional mortgages because they don't meet lending standards. If the electrical system is outdated, or there's foundation damage or the roof's shot, banks won't lend on it. You've got a few options. Cash is obviously easiest if you've got it. $70,000 or $80,000 in cash sounds like a lot, but if you're selling a house in a pricey market, it might be totally doable. Paying cash also gives you negotiating power and closes faster. If you need financing, look into local banks and credit unions in Tennessee rather than big national banks. They understand rural property better and have more flexibility. Some will do portfolio loans that they keep in-house rather than selling them off. Another option is seller financing, which is more common in rural areas than you'd think. An older landowner who owns the property outright might be willing to carry a note for you, especially if the property's been sitting. You'd pay them monthly directly instead of going through a bank. Terms vary wildly, but it can work out well for both parties. Once you've got financing figured out, you need a good inspection. Don't skip this even on a cheap property. Actually, especially on a cheap property, you want to know what you're getting into. Find an inspector who knows old houses and rural properties. They'll catch things a regular inspector might miss. When you're ready to make an offer, remember that in rural markets, things move slower and prices are more negotiable. If a farmhouse has been listed for 6 months at $85,000, offering $65,000 isn't insulting, it's just business. Sellers in these areas often price high, hoping to get lucky, but they'll negotiate. Now let's talk about actually living in these places. Internet is probably your biggest practical concern if you work remotely. Some areas have gotten fiber through state and federal rural broadband programs. Others have fixed wireless providers that work okay. Starlink satellite internet has been a game changer for rural areas, though it's not cheap monthly. Before you buy, verify what internet options are available at that specific address. Call the providers. Don't just check coverage maps because those lie. If you absolutely need reliable high-speed internet for work, this is non-negotiable. Healthcare access is limited in rural Tennessee. Most of these small counties have a clinic and maybe a small hospital, but for anything serious, you're driving to a regional hospital in a bigger town. If you've got ongoing health issues or specialized needs, map out where the nearest appropriate facilities are and how long it takes to get there. Shopping and services are sparse. You'll be driving to bigger towns for grocery stores with good selection, Home Depot, veterinarians, mechanics, pretty much everything. You learn to combine trips and shop less frequently. It's an adjustment if you're used to having everything 5 minutes away. Community integration matters more in rural areas than people expect. These are tight-knit communities where everyone knows everyone. Being friendly, respecting local customs, and not coming and acting superior because you're from a city goes a long way. Show up at the local diner, attend community events, be a good neighbor. Rural Tennesseans are generally friendly and helpful, but they can also be standoffish with outsiders who don't make an effort. If you're planning to farm or homestead, start small and learn as you go. Getting a couple chickens and a garden going is manageable. Jumping straight into cattle or large-scale farming without experience is asking for expensive mistakes. Connect with local farmers and agricultural extension offices. People are usually happy to share knowledge. The climate in Tennessee is actually pretty decent for homesteading. Long growing season, enough rainfall most years, mild enough winters that livestock don't require extreme cold protection. You get all 4 seasons, but nothing too extreme. Wildlife is abundant. Deer, turkey, lots of birds. Also snakes, including copperheads and timber rattlers, so be aware of that. Coyotes are common. If you have small livestock, you need proper fencing and predator protection. One unexpected benefit of rural life in Tennessee is the lack of regulation compared to suburban areas. Want to build a barn? Generally, just do it. Want to have a bonfire? Go ahead. Want to shoot guns on your property? Usually fine as long as you're safe and not too close to neighbors. This freedom is actually a big draw for a lot of people. The pace of life is genuinely different. Things happen slower. People aren't in a rush. Services take longer. But there's also less stress in a lot of ways. No traffic, no noise, no crowds. You can actually hear yourself think. Making this lifestyle work requires flexibility, resourcefulness, and realistic expectations. But for the right person or family, it's an incredible opportunity to own property and live with freedom that's becoming impossible to find elsewhere. Here's the bottom line. These dirt-cheap farmhouses in Tennessee represent one of the last legitimate affordable property opportunities in America right now. It won't last forever. Rural property values are starting to tick up as more people discover remote work and reject the suburban grind. Is it for everyone? Absolutely not. If you need cultural amenities, diverse dining options, top-tier schools, and immediate access to everything, rural Tennessee will make you miserable. If you can't handle isolation, basic maintenance tasks, or slower pace of life, stay where you are. But if you're tired of pouring money into rent or a mortgage on an overpriced house you don't even like, if you want space to breathe and live on your own terms, if you're willing to trade convenience for freedom and affordability, this might be exactly what you're looking for. The people I've seen succeed with this are usually folks with some savings, but not wealthy, comfortable with DIY work, or learning new skills, able to work remotely, or willing to piece together rural income streams and genuinely excited about the lifestyle change rather than just running away from something. You don't have to go full homesteader. You can buy a farmhouse, fix it up to be comfortable and modern inside, and just enjoy having space and low expenses. You can keep your regular career and just live somewhere more affordable and peaceful. Or you can lean into self-sufficiency with gardens and animals and all that. It's flexible. If you want to start exploring this seriously, here's what I'd do. Pick 3 or 4 counties that seem interesting, based on what I talked about. Use Zillow, Realtor, and LandWatch to browse listings. Look for properties that have been listed for a while, since those sellers will be most motivated. Plan a trip to Tennessee and spend a few days driving around these areas. Don't just look at listings. Actually drive the back roads, stop in small towns, eat at local restaurants, talk to people. You'll get a feel for whether an area fits you or not. Connect with local realtors who specialize in rural property. Be upfront about your budget and what you're looking for. The good ones know about properties that haven't even hit the market yet, or can connect you with landowners thinking about selling. Join Facebook groups focused on Tennessee homesteading, rural living, or specific counties you're interested in. These communities are incredibly helpful with practical advice and connecting people. Consider renting in the area first if possible. Some of these small towns have cheap rental houses. Living there for 6 months or a year before buying lets you really understand what you're getting into and make connections that'll help you find the right property. When you do find something promising, move carefully, but don't overthink it to the point of paralysis. Get it inspected, understand what you're taking on, negotiate hard, but if the numbers work and your gut feels good, pull the trigger. The perfect property doesn't exist. You're looking for good enough with potential. Remember that buying the property is just the beginning. The real adventure is fixing it up, making it yours, and building a life there. It takes work and patience, but that's kind of the point. You're opting into something that requires your engagement rather than just being a passive consumer. The broader point here is that alternative lifestyles are still possible in America. You just have to be willing to look beyond the obvious choices. Everyone's competing for the same overpriced real estate in the same cities and suburbs. Meanwhile, there's this whole parallel opportunity in places that people have written off or never considered. Tennessee's not the only place with deals like this, but it's got a good combination of affordability, decent climate, reasonable taxes, and actual quality of life potential. It's worth serious consideration if you're looking for a different path. So that's the full picture on these dirt-cheap farmhouses in Tennessee. Do your research, visit in person, go in with realistic expectations, and if it's right for you, it could be the best financial and lifestyle decision you make. Thanks for watching.